All right. So I will just get started. I thank you for being here. We look forward to sharing all of this with you. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay. An article from The Guardian from a few years ago brought attention to a symposium organized in Vienna on World Social Work Day. So social workers from around the world came together to talk about refugee issues. The article describes how social workers are supporting migrants and refugees in countries they are leaving and in camps they have set up in Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon, in the UK, Germany, Afghanistan, and Austria. According to the article, social workers from countries affected by the refugee crisis came together to pool information so they can best support refugees throughout their journeys and on their eventual arrival. So in the field of social work, there is an expectation, according to our accreditation standards, that social workers gain the knowledge of global interconnections needed for competency in advancing human rights and social justice. And even beyond this, there are many reasons why we want to provide this knowledge to our students. We do live in an interconnected world. So what does understanding global interconnections mean, especially for social work? It means understanding the causes of globally interconnected problems, such as displacement and poverty, climate change and war, and the consequences for individuals, families, communities, and the society more broadly. It means becoming familiar with strategies being used across the world to solve common global problems. It is just so enriching to see all the different approaches that are being used under different circumstances. And finally, effectively coordinating the efforts across countries when intervening, when working with individuals, families, and communities that are affected by globalization. Let's see. One second here. So we're going to share teaching and learning strategies to increase global and intercultural competence among social work students, which can be integrated across existing social work courses. And I want to say that although we are focusing on social work here, what we're going to be talking about can be applied in other fields as well by tailoring the resource to that field. So we developed this teaching resource as a collaboration between the CSWE Center for Diversity and Social and Economic Justice, that's a Council on Social Work Education, the Catherine A. Kendall Institute for International Social Work, and Words Without Borders Campus, which Nadia will be describing later in the presentation. So first, from a pedagogical perspective, you know, how would we approach this, and what are the ways of approaching this type of teaching that will actually come across the students and you know, make a difference? So a typical approach to helping our students make sense of issues facing communities is through the use of data, theory, and analysis. So for example, we can give our students data showing the rate of poverty among Blacks as twice that of whites. And we can introduce them to a theory that attributes the economic disparity to structural racism and intersectionality. And we can offer an analysis of the characteristics of poverty that results in particular from structural disparities. For example, a characteristic is poor health and excess deaths due to untreated diseases, which clearly should not be happening, but result from the disparities. But because this form of information, these forms of information are abstract, we need to take it a step further to help students visualize what these problems mean for people and communities and the society at large. So research shows, and there's a lot of research on this, that narratives and stories help students to better expand their understanding of this more abstract knowledge and motivate empathy in real life situations. It can be transferred to that. I'm sorry, there we go. So for example, there are many studies, but according to a 2018 study of 27 countries, reading creates a heightened awareness in students about global and intercultural issues, in a sense of actually being able to do something about those issues. And then multimedia resources, such as image, video, and narrative, and exposure to socio-geographical, political context also deepen this type of understanding. So all this helps turn abstract concepts into concrete content, but it also makes learning more engaging for the students, which is really the key for learning, is that engagement. So an alternate approach is to start with the readings and the multimedia resources and have students discover trends, data and causes and consequences and characteristics of problems for themselves through observation and critical thinking, which is the approach that I use in my teaching. But it goes back and forth, of course. So from my own experience, I have seen firsthand the students, level of engagement really being much higher to more conventional teaching that I myself used to engage in. Also much more critical thinking and empathy from using literature, both from the US and from across the world, to learn about social justice and interculturality, which is the connection between cultures. So our teaching resource, which is called Preparing Students to Practice in an Interconnected World, I mean, that's what we're calling this curriculum, combines short pieces of literature as well as full-length books with teaching and learning multimedia sources. So I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of how you would navigate these resources before we show you some examples. The resources are on the Diversity Center's website, which we have put on the chat under Preparing Students to Practice in an Interconnected World. And by the way, there's a little gold star on the left top corner of the slides that that are actually coming directly from one of our web pages, as was the newspaper article that I used at the beginning. So yes, so scrolling down in that page that I just showed you, we have a list of readings identified by country, the connection countries with, these readings are connected. We have readings from Iran, Mexico, Russia, and Syria. This is a preliminary list of readings. This is kind of our preview. The theme of this initial set of readings is immigration. And we include a reading on refugees living in Australia. We have a reading on the journey to the United States of a Mexican immigrant and their beginning life here. The story of a young Iranian immigrant living in the streets of LA, story of a human trafficking in Russia, the story of the resettlement of 2 immigrant women in the United States. And that one shows a lot about their interactions with the social welfare system. And the story of an Iranian woman who decides not to leave Iran, which is another aspect of immigration, which is not moving. And we're going to be adding more readings and resources on a range of themes, such as poverty, family, coming of age, and living in periods of social transformations. So clicking on the title takes you to a teaching module that looks like this, and it contains links to 2 sets of resources. So first, when you're clicking on the title that's in the text box, takes you to the website of Words Without Borders campus, where you will find the story and a rich set of sources covering socio-geographic political context. And Nadia will discuss this in a minute about Words Without Borders campus. And the second part below that, titled Social Work Teaching and Learning Resources, are resources that Natasha and I, who are both at the University of Texas, and also working on this project for the Council on Social Work Education, that we're going to be showing you a sampling of those. And those are very specifically tied to social work practice, to inform social work practice. I want to say my connection to Nadia was actually very exciting. I follow literature a great deal, and one of those times when I was reading some literary review, I learned about Words Without Borders, and I just thought I had, found paradise, because to have all these books in one place with teaching resources, which I thought was amazing, and a wonderful place, resource to use in connecting it to social work. So I'm going to turn it over to Nadia, and I'll stop sharing. Do I need to stop sharing? There we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. Before I get started, let me just say that I'll be asking some questions. I'll be asking for volunteers, and also if questions come up for you, we'll have time at the end, but if something feels urgent, a question or a comment, please just feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead. So we'll be talking about one of the stories that Dr. Padilla just introduced. And before I go into that particular story, I'd like to ask you what comes to mind when you hear the word invisible? What are your immediate thoughts? Maybe some images come to mind. I put the question in the chat, and feel free to either unmute and go ahead and talk, or put your response in the chat.
Nadia, do you see the chat?
I do, yes.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
Thank you. I see from Hope Not Seen. Can people be invisible? Hidden bias. Yeah, so we can, thank you, Janice. So we can be, some aspects of us can be invisible to ourselves. And that's very relevant to what we're about to look at. Anyone else? Any immediate responses to the word invisible? Doesn't matter. Yeah. Doesn't matter to whom? So the reason why I asked this, needs unmet. Excellent. Thank you. Yes. So the reason why I asked this is that I'm about to share with you the essay that Dr. Padilla mentioned by Amir Aryan. And Amir, who I later got to know, that's one good thing about contemporary literature, you can just reach out to the authors, is an immigrant who's now in the States, but first he moved from Iran to Australia. And when he got to Australia, he had gotten an academic position there. And another Iranian friend sort of coerced/strong-armed him into being a volunteer English teacher as well, working with refugees from Iran. And these were people very different from himself, even though they were from the same place and they shared a culture, and sometimes they were of a similar age too. And this strikes me because I don't have a social work background, but I do have a teaching background. And sometimes teachers may share some aspects of their backgrounds with their students, but still have points of difference. And so the question that I think about as I read this essay is, how do we not let those differences become divisions between ourselves and the people we serve? So what I'm going to do next is show you that piece of literature, and I'm also going to ask for a volunteer to read the second paragraph. And I'm going to put the second paragraph in the chat, as well as linking to the literature and sharing my screen. So you can look at it in three ways. You can open up a tab in your chat. Sorry, you can open up a browser tab, or you can read along with me when I share my screen, or you can look at it in the chat. So here's the link. And then here's the part that I would like to ask someone to read out loud. And so just start taking a look at that as I begin to share my screen. Okay, so I'm asking for a volunteer to read out loud the second paragraph, not the Henry Miller quote, but the part that starts, "A part of every society is invisible." And if you're willing to do that, please go ahead and unmute yourself and just begin, please.
Okay, I'll read it.
Thank you very much. Who is this, please?
This is Hope.
Oh, thank you so much, Hope.
No worries. I get what it's like to be on the other end. A part of every society is invisible, human beings of flesh and blood who live before our eyes, and yet, as Ralph Ellison's protagonist in Invisible Man states, we refuse to see them. We hand them our credit cards at supermarket checkouts, fill our stomachs with vegetables that grow on their farms, wave at them in the street when we need a ride. We encounter them all the time, yet they remain invisible to us.
Thank you so much. And this is probably pushing my luck, but I think it helps to hear something twice when it's completely new to us. So is there another brave person, or just a willing person, who could read that paragraph to us again?
I can read it.
Thank you very much. And who is this?
Janice.
Thank you so much, Janice.
A part of every society is invisible, human beings of flesh and blood who live before our eyes, and yet, as Ralph Ellison's protagonist in Invisible Man states, we refuse to see them. We hand them our credit cards at supermarket checkouts, fill our stomachs with vegetables that grow on their farms, wave at them in the street when we need a ride. We encounter them all the time, yet they remain invisible to us.
Thank you so much. So now that you've heard it a couple times, I'm interested in your immediate responses. What emotions come up, and do any experiences come up? Maybe your own, maybe those of clients that you've worked with, maybe students, maybe members of your community.
It makes me feel like a sense of loneliness. I took a position last March 1st, in a new position within my company. And then 3 weeks later was COVID, right? So send us home. So I've been working from home for almost, for a year. And then previously I worked in a very, very busy office. So I'm still adjusting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So hard to just talk on the phone with the patients because I miss them, I miss their faces, and you can't get as personal.
Yeah, it's alienating, and first to come to a new place, and then to not even be able to get to know the people there, and to serve people when you're at a distance. It's really 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 difficult. Let's see. Hope wrote something in the comments. When I am shopping, many times I'm thinking about who is on the other end to produce and pick the food I am enjoying. I sometimes try to envision who that person is. That's great. That's rare. I think it would be probably a better state of things if more of us did that. Anyone else responses to the idea that some people in our society may be invisible?
I wanted to add something to the comment just made right now, because in one of my social work courses, I had a student who, they all volunteer somewhere, and he was volunteering with homeless people at Salvation Army. And he used to work at a Pizza Hut. And he told me that one of the women who worked there was someone he had seen or he had met at the Salvation Army. And actually the other way around. This is someone he worked with, and then he saw her at the Salvation Army. And that talk about this whole invisibility and then seeing, and he was so struck with that, and so beautifully, I should say, struck with that, in having this realization that people, we don't know where they're coming from sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It sometimes takes an entirely different context for us to see them. And I think that's a really good transition back to this story. So I'm going to share it again, but let me just say that Amir's story is that he calls himself, I think, a typical Tehran, that's the city that he's from, lefty, who likes to stick up for underdogs without ever actually talking to them. So class divided him from his students. And if he hadn't been pushed into this volunteer role, it would have been exactly the same in Brisbane, Australia, as it was in Tehran, Iran, because he was at a university. They were not. He was there legally. Some of them were, some of them weren't. He had an education and language abilities that allowed him to pretty quickly enter the society that he was going to, and they most of the time did not. So they may have immigrated for similar reasons, and he makes that point. The people who we think of as refugees or undocumented have the same basic motivations for immigrating as anyone else. Some of them find life very hard where they are. Some of them are interested in something different, in expanded opportunities. Some people are moving for the sake of a family member. All kinds of reasons. But what they encounter in the new place is quite different depending on the resources that they have when they arrive. So now I'm going to share with you again the literature and just show you a couple of the things that we have. So the literature is always on the left-hand side of the page on the site. And then we have definitions of words people might not necessarily know that might be helpful to your student, bios, which they might be interested in. But what I really want to show you is the context, because there are two things that separated Amir from his students initially. The first one was social class, like we talked about. One of his students he calls a resourceful street kid from South Tehran. And that's very different from who he was in Tehran. And so there's an article here that helps people understand that. And then the other difference is their status as immigrants. So in addition to being invisible because they might have jobs where people don't tend to notice who's serving them, they might also be physically invisible because Australia likes to detain immigrants on islands outside the mainland, and conditions in those places are pretty terrible. And it's sort of, the conservative government is sort of using it as a deterrent. And, you know, somewhat similar to how we separated families a couple years ago. And obviously that is a very different reception than someone gets when they found a university position and go straight there and the faculty welcomes them, etc. So I wanted to show you that because that might be something that you can look at with your students and have them also reflect on where they might have similarities with the people that they're serving or going to serve, and where they might need to build bridges through carefully listening and doing research and trying to develop empathy and maybe some humility in order to understand their clients. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was teaching ideas. So some of the teaching ideas are really literary, but I also try when we develop them to make sure that we look at the important themes in the literature. And here we have a couple of questions that I think are highly relevant to social workers. So the first is, who are the invisible members of our society? And the second is, how do invisible people become visible? And we're going to pass over that because that's sort of a bigger question, and there are lots of good examples in the essay itself. But the last one I think we can discuss, and it's, how can we help ensure that all members of our community are seen and heard? So I'm going to stop the share now. I'm going to copy the questions into the chat, and we don't have time to break out and talk about them in smaller groups, but if you're doing teaching, I would suggest doing that as part of your work with this story. So let me just put the questions here. And if anyone has any immediate thoughts in response to these questions, it would be great to hear them. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is, I recognize that this particular story may not be the best fit for every group of students that you're preparing. So I'm just going to show you how you can find more work on the website that might be useful to you. Okay, so here we are on an individual piece of literature, and I'm going to now take you to find literature. And on this page, you can scroll through and look. I would suggest that you go straight to themes, because themes are a good connection to topics that you might want to cover in social work. So for example, we have drug wars, something that drives a lot of immigration today. We have revolution similarly, and also these two topics deal with some of the trauma that comes from these events or issues. We have transformation, which may equally be relevant, money and possessions, economic conditions, and food, which deals with food that comes from different cultures, as well as just questions of hunger. Okay, so here I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you very much for participating, and turn it back over to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I'm gonna share my screen again. Start with here. Right there. And let me, okay, all right. So the Words Without Borders campus is truly a treasure that you can go into so many places, and I really encourage you to read some of the pieces, because you will get a really nice sense of the actual stories. The one that Nadia was just talking about is just an absolutely beautiful story. I think one of the things the author says is that refugees can't have unconditional dreams or something like that. And I wanted to mention that the readings on Words Without Borders campus take about 10 to 40 minutes to read, so they're pretty short. They include nonfiction, but they also have fiction, poetry, and graphic pieces. So then, building on Words Without Borders and the readings there, and the multimedia resources, we at the Diversity Center at the Council on Social Work Education, Natasha and I have compiled additional multimedia teaching and learning resources from across the world, as well, with direct applications to social work practice. So, and they inform a range of fields and areas of practice. We organize the teaching and learning resources by themes, such as those that you see on the screen here. Stories in their own words, people's stories in their own words, voices of social workers, humanitarian responses in support of refugees and immigrants, models of welcoming communities, all kinds of themes that we use to organize the resources. We expose students to a wide range of I was going to say that we are going to show you a sampling, just a couple of things of the multimedia resources, so you can get a feel for it. One of the sources that we use are videos. So we expose students to a wide range of videos that are on the internet, created by the United Nations, by many different organizations, universities, things like that. And so we're going to start with a sample video that Natasha is going to show us right now. And I will stop sharing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. The teaching and learning resource we will show you here is a video describing life in a refugee camp told through the eyes of a child.
I think the sound is off. There's no sound, Natasha.
Can you hear it now?
No, it's let me see.
Natasha, I would try sharing your screen again, because there's a little small box at the bottom
Okay.
that says share your computer sound. If you click that before you click your screen, it should help.
Okay. Let me try again. Can you hear it now?
No. I can try showing it through you. Do you have the YouTube link? Or is that what you're showing?
No, I'm just showing through the downloaded video that we have.
I wonder if the YouTube link would work better.
Mm,
Do you have, I can send it to you on chat.
okay.
Okay.
When you basically load it up and you're ready to screen share, as Shane is saying, there's 2 buttons at the bottom. Okay, you really have to hit both if you're going to make it work. A YouTube video should work better. So when you bring up the YouTube, there's 2 boxes at the bottom. You check both and it should play easily.
And I just sent you the link on chat.
I can also share it, Natasha, just so that you guys don't have to worry about that. I'll bring. Oh,
Okay.
Yep. Perfect.
Would you like to share it then, Shaina?
yes. Sorry, that me.
Sorry about that.
Not to add to the troubles, but Zoom's telling me I need an update, so I'm not going to be able to share it on my side of things. I apologize.
Okay, I'll try to do that now again. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
I think this is...
Yeah, there's still no sound. Maybe maybe we can go back to it. What do you think?
What's nice is all the participants have the link to the video. So if everyone kind of wants to open that up on another web browser and you guys can maybe view that at the end of the session, I think might be a good solution.
Perfect, perfect. So this world in which we have turned virtual has taken so much energy. I am so ready to go back to classes on campus because this technology is takes a lot of energy. Okay, so I'm gonna share my
You know
screen
what?
again.
I just pulled it up on
Oh.
YouTube and I hear it fine. If you want to make me a co-host and you want me to try to share it, I'd be happy to do that. It's only a couple of minutes.
Okay.
So if it's part of your presentation, but then Shana, you'd have to make me a co-host.
Yeah, you're a co-host now if you want to give it a go.
Okay, let's see what we can do. You know what the problem is? It's not letting me click optimize for video clip. So let's see what happens. Maybe it'll work.
Mosul, Iraq.
You hear it?
This is my story.
Perfect.
نريد نطلع شنو؟ I live in many refugee camps in Greece with my dad. My mom and sisters are still in Iraq. My dad and I are trying to get to Germany, and then we were sent for my mom and my sister. We are here because just want a better life. In my country, ISIS were killing us. They killed many of our friends. My dad is everything to me. He takes care of me, feeds me, and plays with me. But I miss my mom sometimes. When we came from Iraq, we walked very far. We came by bus, taxi, and then a boat, and then a train. We slept anywhere on the way. Now we have been here waiting for 3 months, waiting for the border to open so we can have a better life. Every night I pray that tomorrow we can go, but nothing happens. I will keep praying every night.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let me share my screen so I can get this. And all right, so that is, you know, actually listening to this child share his story and show us where he is extremely powerful. It's something that we can't get from, you know, from data or theories or analysis. It together it forms a picture for us and for their students. So another type of resource that the types of resources that we have are accounts, reports, things like that that paint a picture of what social work is like in different countries under different circumstances. So this one describes what social service delivery is like in areas under ethnic conflict. And it's based on an ethnographic study that shows the clashes that arise between providers and the state in Myanmar, and how social workers navigate those conflicts in order to continue to support residents and refugees. Another example of some of the resources are actually sites that have a range of multimedia sources. This one is called Refugees in Town project, supporting integration of refugees and hosts. And as you can see, they have articles, news, art, reflections, analyses. And so students can explore these resources, and these resources draw on refugees themselves, as well as the people in the communities where they are living, their hosts. They include personal stories, art, photography, videos, things like that. And there are several like that we have up on the website. This is an example of a couple of the case studies in that website, in Malawi, in Turkey. And so, partnering or bringing together the literature in Words Without Borders and these other very specific resources that apply and inform social work is how we have this, we bring this resource together, and it's very powerful. So to close, I want to briefly describe a framework for using this resource in teaching. And the first thing I want to say that it's the way we're setting it up is that you or the educators who want to use it tailor it to their own teaching styles, to their own courses, to their own teaching objectives in their courses. So for example, and they can be used, this international content can be integrated into any social work course, even the ones you would never think of, like mental health. But obviously, one thing that comes to mind with this, when we're talking about refugees and immigrants, often is trauma. And obviously all the way to very macro social work about policy and advocacy and those kinds of things, and everything in between. So for example, in a direct practice course, you could have students explore how social work with refugees is practiced across the world, the political context, the main concerns, the intervention they use, those kinds of things. So I have this listed in 2 columns. One is things for educators to do. So one is to integrate the content into an existing course. Then second, to design assignments tailored to the course teaching objectives and teaching style, your teaching style. And plan one class session. Even one class session can be pretty powerful, or as many as you like, or even an entire class. I teach a whole class called How to Change the World, which is about social justice, and it's based 100% on literature. Finally, pick a set of readings. So you curate the set of readings from our list, or others that you might find, for your students to select from. And then the things for students to do individually or in groups is they pick a reading or more according to their interests, and they explore the teaching and learning resources like the ones that we were showing you. I can't emphasize enough that students selecting the readings among a set of readings is critical when it comes to using literature as a way of teaching at all, really. So the idea of assigning a reading to the entire class is not recommended when using literature, honestly, in any class. So even in an English class. The student would consider how international practices can inform our practice in the US, and maybe an example of something they could do to take it further is maybe interview local social workers on their views for example, in this case, the example we've been using is refugees. They could interview a social worker at a refugee services organization. But there's so many things. Or something that I also tend to use myself is they can propose a new idea for how they want to study this. So, you know, in conclusion, the aim is to help social work students form kind of a coherent picture of the interconnectedness of our world to help increase their competence in practice. And from my perspective, it doesn't just help increase competence in practice related to immigrants or specific things like that. Everything is interconnected. So we want them to gain a global and intercultural competence, which according to the United Nations involves learning to listen, to engage in dialogue, and to wonder. All right, so here's our contact information. We've also put it on the chat, and we're going to open it up for questions. All right.
I just want to say thank you for pointing out these excellent resources. I'll definitely be following up and using a lot of them. And, you know, I think more and more literature is coming out to support also the incorporation in general of human rights curricula into all of our courses, as you said. And I'm happy to hear those themes echoed here, you know, that it's important that we thread it through our entire curricula and not just one dedicated, you know, global perspectives course. So I really appreciate these resources. Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't get the actual link or you didn't get it or whatever, if you just Google CSW Diversity Center, it's the first thing that comes up. And there we have a contact us button. And we have provided our emails on the chat for both not Words Without Borders and for us, where you can see all this. And something really important that I had listed here is we are going to offer a webinar that Nadia and Natasha and I are going to be preparing on, I think Nadia, I forget, we have several things planned here on how to use these resources in the fall. So it's going to be free. And so if you're interested in that, if you will contact us and we will put you on the list to let you know exactly when it's gonna be. So.
Does anyone have any questions for any of us? Or responses or comments? I think we have a couple more minutes left.
Well, and we hope this was helpful and interesting. Thank you. We are seeing your chats. We appreciate your notes.
Yolanda, can I just ask a question quickly? I'm sorry.
No,
I have a little boy. He's 5. He looks similar to the little boy in the video. And how do I start to kind of teach him, you know, globally, you know?
yes, I have to tell you.
Idea.
Yes, I have. The library, the Diversity Center has a central library. We call it central, and it's a list of books with book covers and everything. And I include in there, I put that together. It's like 300 books, a children's book section. And I can send you more on that if you'll email me.
Yeah, sure.
So that I don't forget. There's all kinds of things, and there are a lot of incredible children's books that are absolutely beautiful. Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So, any other questions? All right.
Great, then I think I will take this time just to thank all of you three for joining us and presenting with this group. We greatly appreciate hearing different tools and resources, but also narratives and tangible ways to kind of apply those skills. So for our participants, I am putting the link to our plenary is next from 11:30 to 12:30. I put the Zoom link in the chat. It is a webinar format, but we'd love to have you join us. And then lunch will be after that. So a little bit of a later lunch for us, but I can guarantee you that the plenary is worth it. But again, thank you to everyone.
Thank you.